Welcome everyone to today's program, sponsored by the Plant Initiative, Rooted Relations, a conversations with T'uy't'tanat-Cease Wyss and Jaz Whitford. I'm Paul Moss, the Executive Director of the Plant Initiative, and I'm very excited to introduce Cease and Jaz and moderator Giovanni Alloy and to start off our 1-hour program. As we get started, we invite you to post in the chat where you're joining us from today. So Cease Wyss is an educator, interdisciplinary artist, and Indigenous ethnobotanist engaged in community-based teaching and sharing. And throughout their 30-year practice, Cease's work encompasses storytelling and collaborative initiatives through their knowledge and restoration of Indigenous plants and natural spaces. They've been recognized for exchanging traditional knowledge in remediating our relationship to land through digital media, site-specific engagements, and weaving, and have participated and exhibited at many galleries, museums, festivals, and public spaces. Jaz Whitford is a Vancouver-based mixed Secwepemc and settler interdisciplinary artist who embodies anti-professionalism and anti-colonialism as a way to move toward a future where Indigenous knowledge and ways of being are not only respected, but valued and revered. Using a range of materials, forms, and mediums, they work to investigate and express their lived experience and an understanding of spirituality, resistance, ancestral connections, and community care. Their work has recently been presented at Access Gallery, Bill Reed Gallery, Burnaby Art Gallery, and published in Rooms magazine. Moderator Dr. Giovanni Alloy's research focuses on the Anthropocene and new conceptions of nature in art. He currently teaches at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and is the editor-in-chief of Antennae, the Journal of Nature in Visual Culture. Giovanni is also the author of several books, including Why Look at Plants, The Vegetal Emergence in Contemporary Art, Vegetal Entwinements in Philosophy and Art, edited with Michael Martyr, and Botanical Revolutions, How Plants Change the Course of Art. Giovanni has curated exhibitions in the US and Europe and is co-editor of the University of Minnesota Press series, Art After Nature. He is also a board member of the Plant Initiative. The program will start with about 10 minutes each of presentation and discussion by Cease and Jaz, followed by discussion between them and Giovanni. For the remainder of the program, Cease and Jaz will be responding to questions posed by you, the attendees, that will be presented by Giovanni as selected from questions that you post in the Zoom chat. So we encourage you to please suggest questions for Cease and Jaz to discuss by posting them in the chat at any time, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. So this program is being recorded and it will be posted online on the Plant Initiative's YouTube channel. And a link to the recording will be sent to everyone who registered today. With that, I'm turning over the program to Giovanni.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, Jaz and Cease, for being here. I just wanted to also point at the Plant Initiative substantial contribution to these conversations and the great work that Paul has done over the past 6 years. And it's such a pleasure to be able to return to these gatherings with different interlocutors. And in this case, I am particularly fond of our guests because gardening has played such an important role in my research over the past 3 years. That's how I came upon C's work, thinking about gardening as art, thinking about gardening as community, gardening as sustenance. And I truly believe that gardening is the future of the kind of art that we need today. We really need to rethink what kind of art we're making, what art is necessary at this moment in time. We need to rethink who an artist is and what their role might be. And so I think, to me, Cease and Jaz really embody this new turn in the arts more generally. So I can't wait to hear from them and then discuss their work. And with that, I pass it over to either of you who wants to get the ball rolling. Jaz or Cease?
I'll start. Yeah. Hatsquile T'uy't'tanat T'uy't'tanat-Cease Shaman, Cease Sna. And Hat and Squallowin. And when Oxton Squallowin Teats. I wanted to start the session the way I always start, which is to introduce myself traditionally in my language. I am Squamish and Stalo, and my main language that I speak that is indigenous is Squamish Snachum, and it is a Halkomelem language. It is part of the 54 indigenous nations of the Pacific Northwest coast that are Coast Salish. We have about 274 languages and communities in our province. And yeah, and so I'm going to pass it over to Jaz to introduce themselves quickly.
Hi, I'm Jaz. You'll just have to excuse me if I'm a bit hoarse and coughing and sneezing and stuff during the talk. It's really nice out today, but for the past few weeks it's been really, really smoky from the forest fires. As many of you might know, we have really bad forest fires every summer in the province that we live in, so-called British Columbia, and the states bordering Canada. And many other places, of course. But yeah, I'm a bit sensitive to it. I'm just outside of Vancouver, where I usually live, um, on Vancouver Island. And yeah, it's really beautiful here. So if you see me looking around, it's just I'm still paying attention. But yeah, it's great to be here. Hopefully I can um, share some interesting stuff. Cease, do you want to pull up your screen share and we can
Oh,
just
sure.
start talking about maybe a bit how we met and our first project, and then I think from there it'll kind of just we'll just riff off of each other and
Here
how
we
we usually
go.
do.
Okay, hold on. Oh, I hope I did it right. Yeah. I thought I did something else wrong. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So, um, well, here we go. Here is one of the first gardens that Jaz and I worked on together. So it shows the different stages, and you'll see these wonderful shapes that are surrounding the garden beds, and those are made with these weird plastic socks. That was our first experimentation, which we don't like the plastic part. The straw was really great, and it did help give us like really wonderful forms that we could lay out. And so you can see the different stages in the top left corner. It shows a scene that we won't see anymore, which is a beautiful little cob bench and oven, which has actually now transformed into another beautiful setup, but using the same thing, same idea of this circular element with a fire and hearth to have in the garden for different occasions, like to cook or to stay warm.
And
But
more recently also to smoke smoke animal hides as a part of different cultural teaching practices that I do as well in the garden, that I use different garden spaces for.
yeah, we like to do all of our land-based learning as much as possible in the gardens that we create, so that we can, not only create a space that is Indigenous, decolonial, and community-based, but that is in parts of the community that are really necessary. And so this garden here is in an area of Vancouver called the Downtown East Side. It has predominantly been the poorest neighborhood in Canada for multiple decades until we were recently over over gentrified by our corrupt mayor that has created an imbalance in the income of the downtown east side and big developments going in. So it's really like the airspace is getting gentrified as well as the land space, and to have a garden in between two buildings is, I think, quite a statement of this time and this period. And to put all Indigenous plants in there, working with Indigenous youth is I think probably the most radical thing we're doing in the city, making sure Indigenous youth become the experts of Indigenous permaculture and also of just knowing the ethnobotany of the land. And so I think Jaz can speak a bit more of that because they have spent a number of years in this garden from installing it to currently continuing to make sure it stays alive.
Yeah, so yeah, when Cease and I first met, we met through a few different other projects and gatherings through a festival called um, Vines Art Festival. It's now like an arts society with other offshoot programs throughout the year. Um, the festival itself actually just wrapped up a few days ago in Vancouver. So I encourage you guys all to look up Vines Art Society. With different ways to support on the website there. We do a lot of community gatherings and cultural teaching and have a lot of opportunities for underrepresented artists in the city and also from rural communities outside of the city to be able to engage and even be paid for their art practice to get them started in the art world. It's really awesome arts organization that I've been so lucky to work with for so many years. So we met a bit through that and a few other gatherings, and then Cease invited me and a few other youth. I think there was what, like eight of us, Cease,
Hmm.
or
Yes.
eight or so of us,
Yes.
to be part of the what you see in these photos is previous to these photos, it was just a big empty lot of gravel. And before that, it had been used as to show art installations for a few years before that. That would just kind of were very static. And then Cease got the fellowship with Gallery 221A, which at the time was just a few streets over. And now they have other buildings throughout the city and stuff that we I'm somewhat a part of. But she had a fellowship, so she designed the design of this garden with this Coast Salish designs that you can kind of see in these photos. And then maybe you have that top design photo, Cease, the blue one. Yeah,
Yep.
that one. So that's like the bird's eye view of the shape of the garden. It doesn't look exactly perfectly like that anymore because as it's evolved, it's like, the plants have grown and yeah, it's a
Yeah.
little more wonky than that now. But that's the original idea. It's pretty close still.
Mm.
And it's quite a big space. I'm really bad at estimating like square footage, but it's quite big. It's at least triple the size of most people's apartment in
Yeah.
the city we live in. Um, and on both sides of the space, so both of the long sides of this photo are like very tall brick buildings. So yeah, it's like a little microclimate oasis in between two buildings in an area of the city that doesn't have a ton of green space. Um, so when Cease and I started on that project, she hurt her ankle really badly, broke her ankle, and then ended up getting sick from that. And so she asked me to take over the project. And I was like pretty, I had the privilege to have been taught a lot about plants, indigenous plant medicines, and growing plants and gardening, basic gardening, like vegetable gardening type stuff as well, when I was a kid from my family and my mom and my grandparents. But I was pretty new to be doing it as like like an art practice kind of thing. And I can't remember quite how old I was. I forget like the exact year, but I think I was like 19 or 20.
Yeah.
And I was at the time I was like homeless and living in my van. And I had been living in my van for a few years at that point. So I was always on the lookout for opportunities like that to be able to support myself because I just like could not I couldn't like be consistent enough in a job without housing or like a 9 to 5 job. And obviously just like if you're an artist, I think you know that it's just not easy to keep a 9 to 5 if that's not what you're meant to be doing. But
Yeah.
I'm lucky that it led me in the directions that I have, so now I'm able to support myself better. here, which I'm so thankful to Cease for, and everybody at Vines Art Festival and T'uy't'tanat and all these other organizations that gave me opportunities when I was younger and had like much less experience. Um, but yeah, so Cease got sick. I took over the project quite a bit. She wasn't able to come every day and direct the rest of the youth, so I like made sure that the plants all got put in. So as you can see in the picture on the right there, then those some of those plants are just like so small, and now the plants these photos are all quite old. The plants now, some of them are like over 14 feet tall. So this bottom left or my bottom left corner, you can't even see the street from that angle anymore because all the plants are so big and bushy and huge. And then during this process, that little red oven, like Cease was talking about, it's like a little pizza oven kind of design thing in there that was meant to be. Um, I'm seeing somebody is not seeing the plant photos. It's just like the photos that are there. Like the photos, I don't know, I can see them.
Yeah.
But
So they're not visible?
can you see them?
I mean, I can't tell because of how my
Yeah,
screen is.
Yeah, we
we
see
can
the
Okay.
see them.
images.
Okay,
Okay.
good. All right.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, no worries.
Um, but yeah, the hearth or whatever, the little fire pit thing that we made there, the plan was to have like um regular meals together with the community and be able to invite other people um to be able to have meals with their communities and kind of like uh build up our our little scene in the garden there. As you can see on that end of the site, there's a gate. So there's like it's gated. So it's the space is actually really previous to us called semi-public. So both ends of the lot were are like blocked off. But they're open, supposed to be open for certain hours every day or certain days of the week. And then closed at night. So we are like situated in a neighborhood with like a lot of drug use and like people who have no place to live and really limited access to green spaces um where they can like sleep or use drugs or whatever they do. And they're like very heavily policed. And I was one of those people when I was like first, becoming part of this project and not feeling welcome in green spaces, including like parks and stuff, like regular parks. Um, that was like a hard time, especially as an Indigenous person. Like we deserve access to like basic green spaces because we don't have
Yeah.
access to like the wider rural areas in our lands that um you know the story, I hope. But
Yeah, I hope
yeah.
so too.
So yeah, it was really important to me when I first started engaging in the space and then later on took more of a role of kind of outreach and programming, that I was making it open to those communities who are like mostly excluded from like your average green space or city park that's being patrolled and policed by bylaw and other people who live in the city who are offended by homeless people existing and things like that. So I've like done quite a bit of work in producing signage with the help of the organization and other artists to make sure that people understand like you don't call the police. This is a semi-public space. If you don't like what you see, like this is an email or phone number, but don't call the police or like don't tell people to leave, like, stuff like that. And since then, yeah, I don't know. I just think people can tell that it's a special space um where people feel welcome, and some of those people really don't like truly don't feel welcome many other places in the city. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything
Yeah.
like that, Cease.
Yeah, I'd like to also add to all that. And that was the whole goal to this site was to really focus on Indigenous youth and marginalized people and to really create a space for that community and for that neighborhood that is accessible. And, so looking at the site, you can see it's all flat. And on this drawing, you can see as Jaz was pointing out, on each end, there's a fence, and you can see it from the little zigzags on each end of the picture here. It just shows the fence. And this was our architectural drawing that ended up becoming the signage on the site, which we love because it shows all the different elements of what it took to create this. And we worked with Indigenous youth that were coming around, participating in programming at 221A leading up to this actual installation time. And a year before, when I was asked about it, I decided to take a decolonial Indigenous women's permaculture course in Seattle. And so I went to Seattle like for 3 months, once a week, for weekends, and learned as many extra techniques as I could. And that was where I was able to actually feel a lot more confident going into this project and learning those techniques, and then being able to share those techniques with Indigenous youth and helping them actually see ways of working with the land, repurposing things. So like you saw in this picture here, especially right here. So this was kind of the heart and soul of how we wanted to create the mounds, was to make these shapes. I drove around and actually took, like, these stumps came from the backyard of where I lived, and I saw that they were really rich in mycelium. And I'm going to zoom in a bit more so you can see the white patchy stuff. That's all mycelium. And so I knew that's going to create a really good network underground for all the plants that we put in. And we were all doing this from scratch. Like, this was the very first time I applied any of this element and technique. But you know, what took me, I always tell people what's really hilarious is what took me 6 months to properly learn. I showed the videos to Jaz and the other youth of the techniques we're going to do, and then they went out and they just did it. And so it was like this instant, for me, it was instant gratification, because I'm like, oh my God, I spent months learning this, and these youth just look at it and understand it and just do it. And so I think that's one of the strong points of doing intergenerational work and having, youth and elders and older people that are knowledge keepers and know things. And so even though, yes, I've been gardening for pretty much my whole life, there are elements of permaculture I never properly studied. And I was able to really do that with this Indigenous women's group in Seattle. And we were coming from many nations, but all of us had this strong feeling that we wanted to really show that permaculture is strongly rooted in Indigenous practices. And those include repurposing everything in your yard and around you. So you can see we've, used these stumps and then twigs, and we went around and actually picked up all kinds of leaf matter from people's yards. That was the time of year where people were putting stuff out in their yards in paper bags. So we just, a friend of mine and I went around with a little pickup truck and picked everything up and loaded up all the materials. So actually, in the background of this picture, you can kind of see some straw and some soil, but behind that was big piles of these materials here, so that people could really just literally go and pick up what they needed and put it in place. And with young people, they're always super sharp and on top of it. And yeah, within a few weeks of starting this project, which I thought would have been done within a few weeks, it really took a few months to do all the stages, right, Chaz? And so we had to really be on top of, how we did things. Then I break my foot, and it was really bad, and I had a deadly staph infection that came on later on. So right when we launched the garden, I had to be really fast and quick about it. But the most important thing to me was to honor the youth who did all the work. And my community came out and sang songs to them. We held them up. We put blankets on them. That's a cultural thing we do, is to blanket people, and the symbolism that we wrap them in comfort and in safety and protection. And so I really see the work we do on the earth with people, and especially Indigenous urban youth, that are left out of the margins of everything in society and are never given the place that they deserve in society. They're always looked down on, and all that stuff really angers me. And because when I work with young people, I just see all their beauty, their potential, how smart they are, how they tease each other and propel each other forward, and they build community within their conversations and strengthen each other's confidence in the knowledge that they're learning, which can sometimes feel overwhelming. And so for me, I'm going alone into the States every week for 3 months, and was kind of intimidating at first because I didn't know any of the people, but I built community really fast with them. They were awesome, and we were all there for the same reason. And that's what happened with this project. The young folks that came out all had the same need to be aware of what they were doing and what are these plants and what do they look like from the roots up. And I think that's one of the really exciting things about the work we do, is that often if people haven't seen plants from the roots up, they see something like Oregon grape and they're like, what the heck is with these roots? They're bright yellow. And and so it's all of a sudden the questions start coming up. Why is it yellow? What do we do with this? So we start talking about the medicinal properties, as well as the fact we can make dyes with the different parts of the plant. And so all these questions start coming out, and intergenerational knowledge sharing starts to take place. And we just have great times. We always have meals. I always make sure that on projects like this, food is provided. And if the people running the program don't, I go get food. I cannot let young people and hardworking people starve and have to leave the project an hour in to get a meal and then miss the whole day. Like, it's so much better to throw out a picnic blanket full of food or a table and just be like, feed yourself as you're hungry. It's really important that people nourish themselves when they work on the land, and that they honor their own body and their own strength and capabilities and their limits. And so I knew my limit. I couldn't work, and I watched all these young folks, and I saw how Jaz really stood out, and I teased Jaz and I said, "Oh, do you want to be able to boss people around more?" And they're like, "Oh, heck yeah." And so I said, "Well, I broke my foot and I can't actually think properly because I couldn't take medications. I'm very allergic to painkillers, and so I'd have to sit there in a lot of pain and watch people work all day. And it was, we did 4 hour to 6 hour sessions, but we tried to keep it at 4 hours because, again, we should not push people's limits. People are learning things in their minds, they're physically learning, their bodies are learning, and you're going through all this transformation. It is very transformative to work on the land and to learn at the same time. And so yeah, we made it easy. In that sense, we set our time at around 4 hours each time. I told the young folks that their day started when they left home, because again, we're not just, if we're going to do decolonial work, we can't just tell young folks that are dealing with so many barriers. We don't even have to ask them, because we can see the strain in their eyes that they're going through stuff. And why build it up by making them shame themselves into explaining why they were late and why so many things happened in one day. And I just told every one of them, you're paid the moment you leave your home. And when you get here, even if you get here and there's 5 minutes left in the day, you showed up. So just show up. So I don't know. I think that kind of helped. I hope it did. And
And
Jaz
I
can.
think it's worth mentioning too that like even though some of the other youth, even beyond myself, were like in very precarious like situations where like it was sometimes a struggle to show up to work, and then once we got there, like difficult to work. Nobody took advantage of that opportunity to like give ourselves time and space to learn how to work. I think it's worth saying too that, sorry, I'm gonna try and speak more clearly. I feel like I'm
Mhm.
um I think it's worth mentioning too that um when it comes to the Indigenous youth that we work with is we do sometimes work with other youth as well, and just people of all ages. But when it comes to the Indigenous youth that we work with, like Cease is saying, like the transformative side of the work that we do is like really spiritual, and it's like a difficult to explain to a person who might not have had opportunities to be on their own land taken away from them. But once that's happened to you or has happened to generations before you, and you've been through that trauma or have intergenerational trauma that way, it is really like a spiritual, emotional learning process to start learning your traditional teachings again. And that takes like physical, mental space. And it takes like the people you're working with to like be mindful of that. And Cease has done a great job of that. And like I was saying, the people with Vines Art Society and people who uh, have been supporting me for many years all understood that, I think. And yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's like we put too much pressure on these youth programs where we want results, and the real results are young people showing up because of all their barriers that they deal with. And I never have a single doubt in my mind ever that Indigenous youth are going to show up and that they're going to benefit in every way from being on the land. I, I've grown up in a time frame where people hoarded knowledge and they were gatekeeping all the time and they wouldn't tell people things, and you had to be, so like pure in every single way of mind and heart and no substance use, all these things. Like I personally had to sign uh contracts through all of my youth work years of 30 years. I had to sign contracts that I would not drink on site, even though I never drink, but I still had to sign these contracts, and that I would conduct myself in a certain way. And I thought, well, what are the youth having to sign? Like, what contracts do they have to sign to show up? And so I didn't want to create barriers for anybody coming to work with me in any of the projects I do. And especially since Jaz and I have gotten to work together so much over the last close to a decade, and how we've really learned how each other's styles are of working, because we try to really see who each other is and our working styles. We don't just make assumptions about one another, because that's also very colonial, to make assumptions about how your coworker is going to, do their work. And I think if we just have more confidence in one another and believe in one another, we will get far more accomplished, and we will have a lot more fun, and we will all be able to walk away with this confidence of how we speak to one another, how we see one another, and how we each connect to the land. I just wanted to say that the image I put up, just because this is what inspires us, is ancient forests, and this is an image from my territory up on the Sunshine Coast in the west coast of Vancouver. Is an ancient forest within a 3 hour travel from where Jaz and I both live to get up to this space. And that's nothing short of a miracle, to still find even a tiny uh, ancient forest that's been left. And, the work that we do, we go into forests, we look up into the sky, we see how things should look. And, even though our gardens would take centuries to get here, these are the inspirations that we have. We look to the land, we look to the sky, we look into the mountain ranges, we look at different ecosystems, wetlands, and those are the things that guide us. And we'll constantly be, either going to these places together or on our own. Like Jaz is on a trip right now, and I'm sure at some point we'll be telling me we need to go to this site. We need to both take a trip up and go to this site. I just recently came back from one of the Gulf Islands, Galliano Island, and discovered a massive Indigenous nursery program there. So I'm already pulling Jaz along in there saying, let's go do this. And um, that project's really exciting because on a sad note, the tragedy for this community is that they recently lost the two knowledge keepers they have that know all about the forests, know about the ancient forests, old growth forests, and know about having to replant forests. And so, having lost two knowledge keepers within a week earlier this year, that it devastated the community. And they were looking for intergenerational gardening projects and communities that could lift them up and inspire them. And so when they realized that they were connected to us, they're friends of mine from years ago that we worked in training youth in media, and now it's kind of switching over to land-based work. And so, yeah, now we're going to be going over there over this fall and winter and in the spring to help them build that program and to help that those communities connect back to the land the way they need to, and to help inspire this elder that is kind of left on his own because he lost they weren't just any knowledge keepers. It was his daughter and his son-in-law that died within a week, and so it impacted that community in so many ways, just like losing our ancient forests is all about. And I really see that, we have to go to the land. We have to go to these places as groups and as individuals that are working in this field so we can remind ourselves what we're working towards, and to remind ourselves that as Indigenous people, our people always had forest gardens that ended up happening either naturally or intended with the food gathering and materials gathering that people would do and bringing things back to their camp and to their village sites. It also helped inform and shape the land around our communities. And so we're still doing that. That's what Jaz and I are really working on. That's the big part of our work that is so near and dear to our hearts and our minds, is that we're continuing this work that has always happened in all of our communities that we've come from. And it's not a new thing. It feels new in this time frame to people, but to Jaz and I, we know our genetic memory tells us that this has always been there, and it's what helps propel us forward, and it encourages us to continue having these projects around. Do you want to talk a bit about the fiber project we just came back from, Jaz?
Sure. Yeah, I'm just writing notes too if you see me like down over here. The fiber project. So we started, I guess Cease had previous oh, that's such a cute picture.
Yeah, so
Um,
cute.
Cease had previous relationship with some folks from the Sunshine Coast, which is just a short ferry ride from where we live. They have connections to the art gallery there, and the art gallery is collaborating with a brewery slash kind of like eco project area where they have like community garden space and a farm area where they produce their own hops and make their beer and make their ciders and stuff with the fruit that they grow on the farm. They do community workshops and events and music and all kinds of stuff. So through the art gallery and um, excuse me, through the art gallery, we um, kind of designed and planned how to remove some invasives from a small pond space that they have there where the runoff from the farm goes into this pond space. So there's like almost like a wetland marshy area down in a, I don't know what you call it, not a culvert, but a little pond area. I don't know if there's probably no pictures of it. Is there pictures of it? See the pond?
I don't. I don't have that, but I did
Oh, it's okay.
find one. I was able to throw in an airdrop of the event we were just at the other day to give it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the picture on the screen towards the on the table on the end of the table, there's like some strings it looks like, but those are actually some of the invasive irises that we removed from the pond. And we replaced those, we dried them, and then they used them for weaving. Um, we were also doing a weaving, we were weaving traditional Salish cedar hats as well during that workshop and teaching folks how that looks. Um, and yeah, so we put some new plants in, we took invasives out, we've done some workshops, we're using planting plants that can be used for like textile arts practices and dyeing, weaving, and etc. And then, yeah, trying to teach the community about it. There's a lot of people that are really interested in being a part of those things there. I would say even more than in the city. Um, so that's really nice. I thought also it was worth mentioning too, something about what he said earlier about how putting confidence into youth and like how it changes the practice and how it changes how they show up. I think that's like been just such like a big part of me building my own personal practice as well. Like the way that Cease has valued my time and stuff has shown me how to value my own time and how to expect to be paid, for example, and like to be spoken to and like when I've been invited to other spaces and then not given the respect that I deserve, then I know how to leave the space and not like be involved with those projects anymore, which unfortunately not as much now because I'm a bit more established, but in the beginning it happened so much. And I'm not sure how it is exactly in other places, but in BC especially, like the way that politics are and things here is like a lot of arts initiatives and stuff like do take advantage, unfortunately, of Indigenous youth and Indigenous people in their art practices for like just to seem like they're supporting Native people kind of, but then not treating us properly when we work together. And yeah, if it wasn't for like the way that CEASE practices intergenerational knowledge sharing and like valuing young people, I wouldn't know how to step away from those relationships and value myself properly. So that's a really important part of all the work we do, and not just with Indigenous people, but it has a different value for that. But I think, but with all people, like, and in the arts, I think anybody who's been in the arts for long knows it's easy to be like mistreated or undervalued or for people to say like whatever you're making or doing is not really like worth this much money or this much or that whatever. But I don't know how people can expect artists to support themselves and stay alive truly, to continue making work without valuing them and supporting them in their work. Yeah.
Thank you, Season Jazz. I think this was absolutely wonderful. I think it did so much justice to the work and what I already knew about the work because of the conversations I had with Season. It's always so interesting to hear more and to explore more. Because as I said, I really believe that there's something special about gardens. And so our time is limited, of course, and I'd love to have questions from our audience too. But since Jazz was just talking about the reality of being an artist, it's always hard, right? We know that. But I feel that the two of you navigate a territory that's even harder in so many ways. And I was wondering if you could say something to everyone who's listening to this in terms of advice. What should you watch out for? What is one of the most important things that you need to keep at the forefront of your mind as an artist that works in the field that you are in right now?
Well, it's always important to stay grounded, and of course, it might sound funny. How do you stay grounded in a garden? Because people can get overwhelmed, and the work can be a lot at times. And so, it's always good that when you are thinking about what you want to do, that you remind yourself why you're doing it, who you're doing this with, because it's not always who you're doing it for, it's who you're doing it with. And for me, I constantly remind myself I have a great responsibility as an Indigenous person to make sure that the people coming forward, whether they're my grandchildren or whether they're urban youth in the community that I meet, that we all have to support each other, uplift each other, ask questions, communicate, and build our community so that we enjoy what we're doing and that it means more to us than just a job. Because what we're doing is literally changing the landscape for our future, for our own futures while we're living in it, and for futures unseen ahead of us. And so, yeah, and maybe Jaz can add to that or, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just more of what I was kind of just saying, like you said, just like learning how to value yourself and other people just as people. Um, and even before you know if someone is an artist, like just value people's time and like learn how to be conscious of like that you don't know what else is going on in their life or how much work it took for them to show up to even something simple. Because if you come at it from that direction rather, like the work totally changes. And it sounds like I'm just kind of describing like basic empathy, but it really seems to need to be said because there's so many times that I could say that when that like we just weren't offered that just basic kind of respect, walking into projects or getting to know people where projects were maybe going to be a part of the future. And yeah, it's just not worth it to work with people who don't respect your time and value your
Mhm.
knowledge, especially as Indigenous people working um, in a place where people get people can literally make money off of you, you know what I mean? Like, and take advantage of that. You need to be so careful of their intentions and stuff, and it's not always so straightforward. Like people are sneaky and stuff, and it just has to be said. It's just a part of life, and not just for artists, but everywhere. So yeah. I
And a
also
lot,
believe that people have a lot of good intentions too, though. I don't want to sound too
sure.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
what you do that I think it's so important and it has that pioneering like quality to me in the context of the art world where so much has been happening inside the museum, inside the gallery space, is that you work outside. And of course, I think that that's part of the importance and power of the garden to break the whole like art world limitations and shenanigans is to go outside. And you've used the word decolonization as to identify your practice. And I was wondering if the two of you also see an opportunity perhaps to return to the gallery space with the same intensity of that decolonizing idea, or whether that's completely not an option.
I think we've both been a part of like quite a few gallery shows since we met each other, and yeah, we try our best, but there's only so far you can go, obviously, inside of like a white wall space, if you want to call it that or whatever. But for example, it's funny actually that you bring this up because Cease actually has a show right now that I can never remember the title of. Cease
Sanctuary.
Sanctuary, which is in the Vancouver Art Gallery in a huge space on the fourth floor for anyone who has a chance to go see it. I think it's up till January, I believe.
Yeah.
She has a film that's shown inside of a dome space, basically inside of a giant trunk of a tree. And we've gone outside and brought inside cedar, like real cedar boughs from trees that we collected outside. And then we bring them in every 2 weeks. So there's fresh pieces of trees inside of the gallery space, and it literally feels like you're in the forest. The lights are low, and it's like this, yeah, you have to go to experience it. But then the film is playing about cease. I guess I could let you speak on that a little bit if you want to say.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, so it's actually takes place close to where we put this fiber based garden up on the Sunshine Coast. And so it's a small, actually, the photo we looked at of that cedar tree is where it takes place. And They're 1800 to 2000-year-old cedar trees that hollow out, and bears and other animals crawl inside and sleep for the winter. And then they come out, and the whole mountainside's full of high mountain blueberry. And so the whole entire forest is just so ancient that I actually got lost for 3 hours in there last summer. I've never been lost in a forest. So in all the 55 years I've been as an adult and child to adult that I've, been out wandering in the woods, I've never gotten lost. So it's really amazing how lush and thick it is up there. But it reminded me how important these spaces are. And so that project is all about, you know, you know, raising knowledge and awareness of what the logging industry is doing, how invasive it is, how destructive it is, and how important ancient sites are, like these forests literally keep the rest of the planet alive by just existing. And that's why it's important, the work that we do. But I was also going to make a reference that one of the gardens that Jaz and I put in was in a gallery, and we brought our stuff into this gallery for a show called Ghosts of the Machine. And so we installed this garden in there, and I kept telling people, like you want us to bring the outside in there, it's going to affect your whole gallery because they have this high tech airflow system. And you can imagine that, a state of the art gallery is going to have like a lot of things with air conditioning and temperature
It's a
control. And
huge, huge multi-story building.
yeah, we brought in the forest, and that included the bugs. And it was immediately known to everybody that we had brought in lush soil because it had mushroom compost, which to most people, they don't expect the smell. So that smell permeated the whole entire gallery. And it's like they were like, "Oh my God, what's that smell?" And we're like, "What smell?"
They were
Because
like,
we're so used
how long is this manure smell gonna last? And we are like, well, every time you water it, it's gonna come
every
back.
time
It's
I water it.
inside. But like we discussed it before. They were like, no, just do it.
Because I was
Um,
like, we could do this outside, this garden. No, no, it's going inside. Okay. So it's gonna have its own room next to a balcony with a window and a door, but that was not enough. And
Right.
they had all kinds of issues the whole time. But we challenged that. We brought it in and we created this, and partly what they wanted because I'm also an augmented reality artist, and I work with an organization called the Indigenous Matriarchs 4, or IM4 Lab. And so we had the curator wanted the AR mixed in from indigenous artists in with this forest, so it was like a magical forest, right? So it was quite interesting, and I can end up sending you. I'll find some good photos to send you, Giovanni and Paul.
That'd be
And
lovely.
yeah, but that was a really great challenge for us, bringing the outside in, and making that space work for those plants. They struggled for the 3 months they were in there, but then we
Mhm.
brought everything back to Harmony Garden and put it all into our little tiny forest and let everything heal through the winter, and then planted it through our garden afterwards. So although the plants were a bit stressed that year and some of them didn't produce berries because they didn't even have bees to come in and pollinate them,
Mhm.
that
Right.
was that was a real challenge. So, working with people that don't completely understand the outside and wanting to bring that in, yeah, we did that.
The people inside the galleries. Yeah. We have a question by from Lilia. I work at a university. There is a small community garden that I would like to support and help expand. The administration at my uni is skeptical of converting grass into a volunteer-led garden. Do you have any advice about working with corporate style entities who could decide to rip up a garden whenever they want?
yeah, I think do
Oh
have a
my.
lot of experience of this, but I don't know if 5 minutes is long enough to talk about it. But um yeah, I think you just have to be like hard-headed and just like smash your way into it. There's not really like any like simple, gentle way to do it, honestly. It's nice when you can find the right people to support you within the like framework that you have to work in, but It's not that easy. So, yeah, I would just say kind of do it guerrilla style and do the research on other guerrilla gardens, and then like once people see the effect that it has, they rarely want to remove it anyway. And it makes them look pretty bad when they do. So I think as long as you like go into it hard-headed and just be willing to take the risk, it usually works out. And when it doesn't, it kind of makes change anyway. Yeah,
That's a
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful answer,
keep
Jess.
it
Thank
short and sweet.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Maybe we
right.
can answer one more question.
Also, yeah, I'll go for the next one. Felicity, is there a particular plant or relationship with a plant that has stayed with you and influenced your work in a way you didn't expect?
Do you want to jump in on that? Do you want
You
me
can
to
do
go
this.
first? Okay. Well, with the Indigenous gardens we've done, I've had to really learn all the personalities of the sites that we work in, and at times, like with Hostrawai, we couldn't put like a massive cedar tree in there because we'd have to dig it up. We don't know how long we're going to be there. But we did learn to work in a way that we could bring cedar bark mulch in to put around the red huckleberries and into where the strawberry beds are, and it really supported how the plants worked. And so for us, I love all the plants, so it's hard for me to identify one that I've learned a lot from because I've learned so much from each and every one of them. And it's every time you do a garden, you learn something. You learn about the site, you learn about the personality of the plants and how the sun sectors work. And so all of these things make you have to think more deeply about the personality of the plants you want to put in there and how they will do, how they will thrive, and how they will survive.
Paul, do we have time for one more question, or is it time to say goodbye?
Yeah, I think we got to wrap up. But
Okay.
if this is an opportunity, maybe for any of the three of you to just say a couple final words, if you'd like, cease jazz or Giovanni, and then I'll just do a quick wrap up.
Yeah, just say thanks for coming and listening. Hopefully we were able to answer some of your questions with what we were saying. And if anybody else has like specific questions they wanted to ask, you can follow me on Instagram at jazz.w.art, which I can put in the chat. Um, and you can just message me on there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't I should have put I'll do that. I'll put my so that's oh, where did I put it? Oh, I hate when it actually changes. It changed everything, so I have to write it again. Yeah, so I'll put my Instagram on there too, and then people can find me there. Oops, no, it's not. It's there we go. Yeah, so I did that. Yeah, and thank you all for being here today. This was a really great conversation, and it's something that we both want to do more of. Jazz and I want to kind of share more of these dialogues with people and how we work because we hope it's inspiring to other people trying to do this in their communities.
Yeah, this is exactly why we wanted you here today because there's so much talk. If we had more time, I would love to hear what you think about the rewilding excitement that is now s spreading so much across the US and Europe, the good and the bads, how it is being done. There's one thing actually both of you remarked upon that I just wanted to tease to the fore as a closing, perhaps, is that gardening takes time. And that is one of the things I see. The excitement that we see on Instagram for rewilding seems to come with this like idea that everything is quick and the plants will do what we want when we put them here or there. And what I gain from your practice is this persistence, this slow and devoted and dedicated approach that I think is very, very inspiring on so many levels.
Maybe we need a second iteration of this conversation too to answer more
Yeah,
questions because it seems like there's a lot of interest, and I could like probably talk for an entire day just on what you just said. So
wonderful.
Great.
You
Well,
never
th-
know.
thank you. Thanks to everyone, Cease and Jaz for sharing your thoughts and perspectives, and Giovanni for moderating, and the questions that we got. Unfortunately, we couldn't do too many of the questions today, but thank you for posting those. And just to wrap up, this has been one of a series of free online events from the Plant Initiative about the human-plant connection. Our next two events, one is on September 30th, The Ethics of Caring About Plants with philosopher Kate Burlgee, and about the moral value of plants as this relates to their human caregivers. And also the on October 26th, Giovanni will be back as we host a conversation called Planting Art for Other Species with artist Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg. So thanks again for attending today. And if you'd like to support these types of efforts by the Plant Initiative, we're always appreciative of donations to our website at plantinitiative.org. So